Welcome back to Blacklit Memory. Tonight, we're heading deep into the forgotten hills where the maps grow vague and the trails whisper behind your back. These are 8 true-style horror stories about feral people, those who never left the woods or never learned how to live outside them. You won't see their faces, but if you listen close, you might hear their breath behind yours. Before we begin, hit like, subscribe, and share with someone who knows these woods aren't always empty. And tell me in the comments, what's the darkest place you've ever been? Now, settle in. Let's begin. I always said I'd die in the woods, but I meant it in a poetic way, old age. Maybe, not eaten or dragged. I lived alone in a cedar cabin I built myself, halfway up Pinewood Hollow, about 45 minutes outside Boone. No cell service, just a solar battery and a crank radio. I'd been out here 8 years now, running a small wildlife rehab center off state permits and volunteers who never stayed long. Most left after a weekend, said the trees pressed in too tight or the nights were too loud. My name's Lena Ward. I was 34 that fall, and I'd grown up in these hills, back when my mama still canned peaches and strung up garlic like it meant something. I wasn't afraid of bears or bobcats. I'd patched up injured foxes, bottle-fed a fawn, even pulled porcupine quills from a coyote's paw once. Animals had rhythms. People didn't. That was why I left them. The first sign was the scream. I heard it around 2 a.m., long and low like a dying elk, but broken off at the end with a cough that sounded wrong. Too wet. Too human. I'd been sleeping on the cot in my shed, where I kept the rehabbing animals, 3 possums and a fox kit. Nothing big. The scream startled them too. The possums flattened, hissed. The fox kit tried to wedge itself under my boot. I went out with a flashlight. My boots weren't even laced. I figured maybe a bobcat got hit by a car on the road down the ridge. I didn't find anything. Just silence that felt padded, like all the noise had been sucked out of the air. No crickets, no wind, no owl. My flashlight flickered once, just once, and when it came back on, I swore I saw a shape standing at the edge of the tree line. Tall, wrong shoulders, but when I blinked, it was gone. I should have gone back inside, locked everything down, called the ranger when sun came, but I'm stubborn. I left one of my wildlife cams out near the deer trail where I'd seen strange tracks a few days back. I thought maybe it was a cougar rare, but not impossible. When I retrieved the cam the next morning, the casing had been cracked open, not chewed pried. The lens was smudged with something brown and sticky. Inside the casing, coiled between the wires, was a tuft of hair that wasn't from any animal I knew. Wiry, almost black. I checked the footage anyway. The first few frames were normal deer, raccoon, a fox sniffing the lens. Then, around 3:17 a.m., the feed glitched. When it returned, something was moving toward the camera, crawling on all 4s, too fast. I paused it. The figure's arms were too long, the knees bent weird. It stopped inches from the lens and tilted its head. There were no eyes, just skin pulled too tight across a face, then static. I took that camera inside and locked every door. I sent the footage to a biologist I trusted. He never responded. A week passed. The screams returned closer each night. My volunteers stopped showing up. One sent me a message before she quit. "Your woods aren't right. I still kept my rehab animals fed, still made rounds, but I started carrying the flare gun on my belt again. Not for bears, for warning, or defense, maybe both. Then, 3 nights before I planned to leave for town, something came up onto my porch. I didn't hear it, I felt it. The boards groaned in that slow, measured way like someone walking barefoot. I grabbed the flare gun and peered out through the window. Nothing. But the next morning, there were muddy handprints on the glass. Long fingers, no thumbs. And down by the shed, where I kept the animals, the door had been unlatched. Not broken, unlatched. Only the fox kit was missing. No blood, no tracks leading away, just a feather. Not from any bird I could name. It was gray, stiff, and barbed in a strange way that made my skin crawl to touch it. That's when I knew something was watching me. Not hunting, studying. And it wasn't alone. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the door with the flare gun and my granddad's old hatchet across my lap. Every time the wind creaked the porch rail, I thought it was coming back. But nothing did. No footsteps, no scream. Just that same thick silence pressing at the windows, so dense it made the cabin feel smaller. At first light, I packed what I could, some food, a canteen, the flare gun, my maps. I didn't plan on running. I planned on finding answers. I knew those hills like my own skin. And whatever this thing was, it was hiding out near the southern ridge where the old deer trail met the hollow. That's where the tracks had been. That's where the scream had always echoed from. I told myself if I found its den, I could burn it. If I scared it off, maybe I could stay. The hike up was dead quiet. No birds, no squirrels. Not even a single bug buzzing past my ear. The trees felt closer together than they used to be. Branches hung lower, like they'd been pulled down by something heavy. I walked 2 hours before I found the carcass. A deer, torn open, not eaten, just mangled. Its head had been twisted halfway around, but there were no bite marks, just long, thin tears up its flanks like someone had clawed it open, not with knives, with fingers. I nearly turned back, but just beyond the kill site, I spotted it a circle of stones, perfectly arranged, each one marked with a crude symbol. A jawbone hung from a pine sapling beside it, strung up with what looked like tendon. It swung gently in the breeze, though the air was still. I raised my flare gun and stepped closer. That's when I heard it, my voice, calling out from somewhere behind me. I froze. I hadn't spoken since leaving the cabin, but it was me, down to the rasp I got when I was cold. Lena, it said, low and pleading. Lena, come see. I turned slowly, heart hammering in my throat. Nothing was there. I backed away, careful not to turn fully, but something moved then just past the trees. A flicker of pale skin, crouched low to the ground. I raised the flare gun. My hand was shaking. I see you, I said. It stood, and for a split second, I swear it smiled. Then it ran, fast, unnaturally fast. I fired the flare. It lit the canopy in searing red light, and I saw at least 3 of them, all pale, all crawling or standing at awkward angles. One was hanging from a branch like a sloth, watching me with a tilted head. I ran, didn't care about the path anymore, just tore downhill until my lungs screamed and my knees buckled. I only stopped when I hit the edge of my cabin clearing. I collapsed behind the shed, sucking air, waiting for the shapes to follow. But they didn't. The tree line stayed still. Too still. Inside, I bolted the doors and sat in the dark. Hours passed. Nothing. Not until just past midnight, when I heard the porch boards creak again. This time, they didn't stop after 1 or 2 steps. Whatever it was pacing now. Slow, dragging feet. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then came the sound of something rubbing against the wall like skin over wood. Fingers. Searching. When it stopped, I thought maybe it was gone. But then the whisper came. Lena, right outside the window. Lena, come see. I fired another flare through the front window just to scare it off. The light flared red again, lighting up the yard. There were handprints all over the siding. Some high, some low. One set on the roof. The figure I saw crouched by the shed looked like it had once been a person, but it wasn't anymore. I didn't wait for morning. I loaded up the truck and drove. No headlights, just the gravel crunching beneath me and the occasional scream echoing through the trees. The rehab animals I couldn't carry, I had to leave them. Now I live 2 towns over. I never went back. But sometimes, I still find things outside my window. A feather, a clawed handprint, or worse, a broken wildlife cam. Chewed wires, lens smeared red, and my name whispered, clear as day, on the audio. The wooden figure shouldn't have been there. It was sitting dead center in my sleeping bag when I unzipped the tent. Legs crossed, arms resting on its knees like it had been waiting. The face had no features, just faint carvings where the eyes and mouth might have been. And the wood was wet. Not from rain, but damp with something sticky that smelled like old pennies and rot. I didn't touch it right away, just crouched, staring, trying to figure out how it got there. I always zipped my gear shut at night. I was camped on a shelf of stone halfway up Ash Tree Hill. Deep in the Monongahela forest. No one for miles. I hadn't passed another soul since leaving the forest road 2 days earlier. But that little figure, maybe 5 inches tall, wasn't mine. I'd never seen anything like it. My name's Troy Jenkins, 26, ex-Army, and more stubborn than smart. My older brother, Sean, used to hike out here with a beat-up journal and a Nikon camera, swearing it was the only place he ever felt clear. He died last winter, quiet, alone, in his apartment with that same journal open on his lap. After the funeral, I decided to finish his list. 10 places, 10 trails, each circled in his handwriting. Ash Tree Hill was number 6. I didn't believe in any of the local stories. Even though Sean had underlined one passage in the back of the journal, never whistle near the old circle. They answer. He even marked the trail with a symbol I didn't recognize, 3 dots inside a square. I figured it was nonsense. Folklore. The kind of thing hikers like to say over a campfire to scare off the dark. But after I found that wooden figure in my sleeping bag, I started looking over my shoulder more than usual. That day, I pushed deeper up the ridge, past twisted roots and slabs of moss-covered stone. The trees grew in tight and strange, all leaning slightly in one direction. like something had bent them years ago and they never grew back straight. The higher I went, the quieter it got. No birds, no squirrels, just the sound of my own boots crunching through dry leaves. I found another one of those figures around midday, this one wedged in the crook of a tree, head turned toward the trail. By evening, I reached what Sean had marked as the circle. It wasn't hard to spot. A clearing, maybe 30 feet across, with 7 large stones set in a ring. They weren't carved, just unnaturally smooth, like river rocks the size of truck tires. At the center was a stump, flat-topped, dark with age, and stained like something had seeped into the wood long ago. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe the air felt too still. Maybe I needed to prove to myself there was nothing here. I whistled. Just one short note. At first, nothing happened. I laughed, shook my head, and turned to leave. Then I heard it. A second whistle. Same tone, same pitch. But it didn't come from behind me. It came from inside the circle. I spun, heart kicking hard in my chest. There was no one there. The trees beyond the clearing swayed slightly in the wind, but otherwise, everything was still. Then I saw the footprints. Just one pair, barefoot, human-sized. They started at the edge of the stump and led into the trees only in one direction. No path in, just out. I followed them. I didn't mean to. My legs just moved. The tracks led through underbrush, over logs, around rocks. They were fresh, no leaves settled in them yet. And then, after about 50 yards, they stopped. Just stopped. In the middle of a patch of moss. No sign of someone jumping, falling, or doubling back. But there was something else. A third wooden figure. This one was larger, maybe 10 inches, and its face was scratched out entirely, as if someone had clawed at it over and over until nothing was left but gouges. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't take off my boots. I zipped my tent all the way up and set a hunting knife by my side. Every twig snap outside made me flinch. And just before dawn, I swore I heard something brushing against the nylon. Not walking, crawling. When I finally opened the tent, the larger wooden figure was gone. But in its place was a smear of handprints in the dirt, all pointing inward, toward where I'd been sleeping. At sunrise, I packed my gear in record time. I didn't eat, didn't refill my water. Just grabbed my brother's journal and my knife and started heading downhill, retracing my route as fast as I could without snapping an ankle. The forest felt different now, not just quiet, watchful. I knew the path should have taken me past a rocky outcrop I'd used as a rest stop the day before. But after a full hour of hiking, I never found it. Worse, my boot prints were gone. The soft earth that should have held my tracks from the day before looked smooth, untouched. I stopped and turned in a slow circle, heart pounding hard enough to throb in my throat. That's when I saw it. The wooden figure, the first one, or maybe a new one, sitting upright on a low stump just a few feet off the trail. Its arms had been moved now, pointed straight at me. I didn't approach it. I turned and took a different trail, one I remembered leading down, toward a dry creek bed and eventually back to the access road. But the deeper I went, the more off the terrain began to feel. The trees grew denser, the canopy darker. Even at midday, it felt like dusk. I tripped on a root and skinned my knee, and when I looked down, I saw something nestled in the dirt. A backpack, old, torn, half covered in moss. I unzipped it slowly. Inside was a tattered sleeping bag, a rusted multi-tool, and a notebook with a cracked spine. The name inside the cover read, Megan Ellis, June 2019. She was the last missing hiker they'd reported from these woods. I remembered the news blurb's young solo backpacker. Vanished without a trace. Last seen near Ash Tree Hill. The pages were smeared with water damage, but I could still read some of it. The final entries were short, jittery. Voices last night. They know I'm here. Don't answer when they call. The last page was torn down the middle, but 3 words were etched deep enough to rip through. They took Sean. I dropped the notebook. My stomach turned to ice. My brother had never mentioned Megan Ellis. But now her journal was here, buried in the dirt off a trail that wasn't on any map. That's when I heard the laughter. Low, breathless, almost wheezing like it had never learned how to laugh properly. It came from behind the trees, not far, maybe 50 feet away. Then the voice came next, thin and distant, but sharp as broken glass. Troy, come see. My name, my voice. I ran. I don't remember choosing a direction, just bolted. Branches whipped my face. Roots caught my boots. And still I didn't stop. Something moved to my left. A pale flash of skin. Another shadow crossed in front of me on all fours. They weren't chasing, they were herding. I broke into a clearing and nearly dropped to my knees. The circle. I was back. Except now the stones were closer together, the stump darker. And in the center sat a figure bigger than the ones I'd seen before. Knees drawn to its chest, arms long, limp. A head too large for the neck. It wasn't carved. It was breathing. Its chest rose once, slowly. Then it opened its eyes. I didn't wait. I ran again. But this time the trees didn't let me go so easily. They clawed at me, thinned out too late. I stumbled into a patch of daylight and found myself face down on gravel. The forest road. My truck was parked just around the bend, windows fogged, untouched. I didn't look back, just drove until the signal came back. Then drove farther. I never finished Sean's list, but when I got home, I found a package waiting for me, no return address. Inside was a wooden figure. Same shape. Only now, the face wasn't blank. It was mine. Scratched out, eyes gouged, mouth carved in a screaming O. And in Sean's handwriting, below it, they took me. Don't whistle. Don't let the kids wander too far. That gorge eats things. The old ranger said it half joking, half serious as he handed me the trail map. His eyes flicked toward the cliffs beyond the tree line, where fog clung to the rocks like it didn't want to leave. I nodded, smiled politely, but didn't respond. I was too focused on making sure the students were keeping pace and not falling behind. 15 7th graders, all jumpy and sugar-wired. And I was their wrangler for the day. We'd come up from Charleston for an overnight field trip. I was Naomi Greer, 41 science teacher, widow, and the closest thing to a chaperone with wilderness experience. My husband had grown up in these mountains, used to tell me ghost stories about the gorge back when we were dating. I never took them seriously. Stories about skinless things that lived in the mine shafts. Old coal ghosts whispering in the rocks. Good for campfire laughs, not for real life. The morning hike was easy. The kids joked, pointed at salamanders, and begged to see a bear. The trail down to Crawdad Gorge was slick with mud, but manageable. We stopped for lunch near the old collapsed bridge, the one that spanned a narrow gap in the rock. That's where I noticed it. A hard hat sitting in the weeds. Rusted, dented, small. At first I thought it was a toy, but when I picked it up, I saw the faint lettering on the back C, 1946. The size was off. Not built for an adult head. The inside padding was long gone, and something reddish had stained the inner rim. I set it aside and told the kids to stay on the trail. Something about that hat didn't sit right with me. We crossed the stream bed and followed the switchback trail to the old mine entrance. Just like we'd planned. The ranger had warned me the shaft had collapsed years ago, no risk of anyone going inside. But the kids were curious, clustered around the barred opening like it was a zoo exhibit. That's when the knocking started. 3 sharp raps, evenly spaced, echoing from deep inside the dark. The kids thought it was funny, probably a prank. They said I told them to step back. Then the knocking came again. 3 knocks, then silence. "Is someone in there?" I called out. No answer. Just a faint, whistling draft that smelled of wet metal and old soil. I told the kids it was just wind echoing through the rock. Got them moving. But one of them, Micah, a quiet boy who always lagged behind, kept glancing back at the shaft. I caught him holding something later that day, a small piece of coal, carved into a triangle, flat on one side. "Where'd you get that?" I asked. He shrugged. It was waiting for me. That night we camped in a clearing near the old ranger station ruins. The kids roasted marshmallows, passed around ghost stories, and eventually crashed in their tents. I stayed up, sitting by the dying fire, listening to the forest hum. Around midnight, it stopped humming. Everything did. No frogs, no crickets, just stillness. Then the knocking came again. Not from the mine this time. From the trees, 3 raps, close. I grabbed my flashlight and scanned the edge of the clearing. Nothing. Just trunks and branches and too much dark between them. I told myself it was a woodpecker, or maybe a raccoon knocking something loose. I stayed by the fire till dawn. The next morning, Micah was gone. His sleeping bag was unzipped. His boots were missing. His backpack was still there, untouched. No note, no signs of struggle, just a trail of small coal fragments, each one shaped into a triangle, leading off into the woods. Leading back toward the gorge. I called his name until my throat went raw. Micah. Again and again. We searched the camp first, then fanned out. The other kids were scared but quiet. I told them to stay put, stay calm, that everything was going to be fine. But I already knew better. You don't grow up around these woods without understanding what it means when the crickets stop and the air feels thick and low, like something's listening. I followed the coal trail. The fragments led down past the overgrown logging road and through a thicket I didn't remember from before. Branches scratched my arms. tangled around my boots. I nearly turned back but then I found Micah's sock, caught on a bramble. It was damp, stained red at the toe. I kept going, gripping my flashlight so tight my knuckles ached. That's when I heard it low humming, deep in the trees. Not music exactly, more like breath pushed through narrow spaces. It came in pulses, like someone trying to remember a tune they hadn't sung in years. I followed it, ducking under a fallen log, and found myself in a dry ravine. The cold trail ended there. I spotted movement near the base of a collapsed hillside, something pale ducking behind an outcropping. I rushed forward and found an opening in the rock. A narrow shaft, maybe 3 feet high. Definitely not natural. Timber-lined, old. It hadn't been there yesterday. I called his name again. No answer. Then I heard the knocking. 3 raps. Only this time, they came from behind me. I spun, heart in my throat. There was no one there, just trees and that same choking silence. But the knocking came again. Closer now. And with it, a whisper. Naomi. My name. Dry and cracked and close. I don't remember choosing to crawl into that shaft. I just knew if I stayed outside, whatever was calling me would find me. The tunnel was tight. My shoulders scraped both walls. My light flickered once, just once, and in that moment, I swear I saw a figure ahead. Small, crouched, facing away. Micah, I whispered. The shape twitched, then scrambled deeper into the dark. Too fast. I followed until the tunnel opened into a chamber. The air inside was wrong stagnant and too warm. The walls shimmered with moisture and coal dust. In the center of the room, there was a pit, maybe 5 feet across, ringed with stones. Beside it sat the hard hat, the same one from before. Micah wasn't there, but something else was. 7 figures. Slouched against the far wall, too still. Their skin was gray, leathery, as if the air had dried them out. I couldn't see their faces, not at first. But one of them moved, just a twitch of the neck. Then another. And I saw then that their mouths had been sewn shut. Black thread pulled tight through old skin. They weren't dead. They were listening. And then one of them raised a hand and knocked 3 times against the stone wall. The others began to hum, that same broken, wheezing rhythm. I backed away. My flashlight caught something scrawled on the wall behind them. Letters, scratched deep into the coal. We answer what calls. We keep what's lost. I turned and ran, crawled, kicked. I don't remember how long it took to get out. The light behind me grew fainter. The humming faded. But just before the shaft narrowed again, I heard a single voice behind me. Micah's. Tell them I stayed. The next thing I remember, I was outside, gasping in the sunlight. I called the rangers. Search teams came. Dogs, drones. Nothing turned up. The hard hat was gone. They questioned the kids, took my statement, wrote it all down like I was making up some stress-induced hallucination. They never found the coal fragments, never believed me. But I still have the triangle Micah gave me, the carved one. And at night, when everything's quiet, sometimes I hear it again. 3 knocks, and a voice, faint through the floorboards. Tell them I stayed. We weren't ghost hunters or cryptid chasers. Just 4 friends with cameras, old hiking boots, and too much curiosity. Deshaun Avery, me, age 30. Freelance documentarian trying to land something gritty enough to make people pay attention. Alex handled sound. Ben was our drone guy. And Melissa kept us from getting lost or killed. We called it Rust Route, our low-budget YouTube channel about forgotten towns and strange places in the Appalachian backwoods. We rolled into Crixton Hollow in early fall, leaves just starting to burn red. The town had 2 stop signs, one abandoned gas station, and one trail that led up into the hills where people said they lived. Not spirits, not monsters, feral folk, off-grid, inbred, hook-toothed and silent. Rumors varied. Some said they were miners left behind. Others said they were born wrong from the start, carried out of the womb by shadows and raised on blood. We weren't after folklore. We were after what we'd heard on an old ham radio recording posted to a conspiracy forum, a panicked voice whispering, "They move at night. They leave bones stacked in 3s. Don't follow their paths." It matched a symbol Alex had found scratched on a tree in an earlier trip, 3 claw marks in a triangle. We traced the signal back to Crixton. Locals didn't like us asking questions. An old man at the diner muttered, "You'll get fed to the teeth if you go poking up Hook Ridge." A woman sweeping her porch just spat on the ground when we brought up the woods. No one answered doors after dark. That should have told us something, but we were hungry for footage. That's what we told ourselves. Truth was, we wanted to scare ourselves a little. That kind of scared you could cut into a 20-minute video and rack up views. Real fear sells. We hiked in on a Wednesday, set up camp near a dry creek bed that reeked faintly of iron. Ben launched the drone for aerial shots while Alex set up sound sensors along the perimeter. Melissa mapped our bearings, always reliable, always grounded. Me, I filmed everything. Wide shots, candid moments, trees, sky. The way the shadows curved along the ridgeline like something bent them. The first stack showed up at dusk. Bones, fresh ones, clean. 3 bird skulls balanced on a cairn of stones, arranged in a triangle like someone had practiced. Alex thought it was a joke, coyote or some artsy survivalist. He said, we laughed, but I kept filming, zoomed in on the grooves worn into the skulls, like they'd been handled a lot. That night, we heard the steps. Not heavy soft, but deliberate, circling. No crunch of leaves, just shifting weight and the occasional crack of a stick. The forest should have been alive with sound, but when the steps came, everything else stopped. Ben shouted once, trying to spook whoever was out there. Nothing answered, but by morning, his shoes were gone. Just gone. Sitting neatly where he'd left them under the tarp the night before. In their place, a bone, long, yellow-white, and too thick for any animal in these woods, still wet at one end. We should have packed up right then, but the fear made us stupid, made us hungry. We told ourselves this was the story. I interviewed Melissa beside the creek, asked her what she thought. She didn't answer at first, then said, quietly, "They're not ghosts. They're not hiding. They're showing us the rules." We moved camp closer to the bluff, thinking elevation would give us a better vantage and maybe safety. The air felt thinner there, colder. Melissa started marking trees with orange flag tape. Each hour, we'd check the markings, twice, We found the tape slashed clean through. No wind could have done that. No animal would have bothered. That evening, Ben sent the drone out one last time before dark. The feed was smooth until it passed over a clearing we hadn't seen before. Then static. When the video reconnected, something had shifted. Not in the terrain, but in the light. The trees cast long shadows that didn't match their shape. And in the middle of the frame, a figure stood barefoot in the clearing, head tilted, unmoving. We rushed to review the footage, frame by frame. When we zoomed in, the figure's arms looked too long. The hands hung past the knees, the fingers curled inward like claws. No face, just matted hair and teeth dozens. Sharpened into points, hooked. The teeth were what caught our breath. Melissa whispered, "That's not a mask." That night, we posted a guard shift. I took the first. My flashlight barely pierced the tree line. The silence was worse than sound, like something thick pressed between the trees and swallowed every chirp, breeze, and creak. At 2:17 a.m., I heard the first bone snap, not nearby on the ridge above. Then again, snap, pause, snap. I woke the others. We sat in a huddle, not speaking, waiting. And then we saw the shapes. 3 of them, walking in a wide arc along the edge of camp, barefoot, pale, too fast. Not running, but shifting through the dark in a way that left no sound behind. Alex raised the boom mic. The static in his headset screamed so loud, he yanked it off. We broke camp at dawn. No one said a word. We just packed and started back the way we came. That's when we noticed Ben was gone. His pack was still zipped, his drone case untouched, but he was nowhere in sight. We searched, called, ran loops around camp. Melissa found his flannel neatly folded beneath a pine root. A single hook-shaped tooth lay atop it. Clean, white, too big for any man. We didn't talk after that. We moved fast, heads down. It felt like the woods were watching, amused, letting us go. We reached the car by dusk, drove 4 hours in silence. At a rest stop, Alex finally spoke. "You think they let us leave? Because we'll tell people." Melissa just stared out the window. "No," she said, "because we left someone behind." I never posted the footage. But weeks later, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a flash drive. 1 clip, no audio. Just a 10-second shot of Ben, naked, crawling on all 4s through the clearing we'd seen from the drone. His arms moved like his shoulders were broken. His mouth was open, filled with rows of sharpened, hook-shaped teeth. The cicadas used to scream every August so loud you could hear them through shut windows. But the last summer I spent up there, they stopped. Just quit one evening, like somebody flipped a switch. And that silence, so thick and sudden, is what I still remember when I think about Dogleg Ridge. Not the house, not the woods. Just that moment when all the sound drained out of the world and left me alone with whatever was moving out there. My name's Miranda Day. I was 50 that year and tired in a way that no sleep could fix. My father had died in the spring, and I'd driven back from Raleigh to sort through the cabin he'd refused to leave. Perched like a splinter above an old trailhead in the Blue Ridge. I hadn't seen that place in 20 years, not since I was a teenager. The porch sagged worse than I remembered. The paint peeled, but inside, it still smelled like wood smoke and dried apples, like he'd only stepped out for a minute. I stayed to box up the good stuff and toss the rest. Old tools, moth-eaten flannel, coffee cans full of nails. I told myself I'd be done in 2 days. But the first night, I opened his Bible to mark a page and found a cicada shell tucked between the pages of Psalms. Just the husk cracked down the back, delicate and hollow. Its legs were folded under like it had died praying. That was the first thing that unsettled me. The second was the whistle. It came from the woods just after sundown. Not a bird call, not wind, just one long, warbling note like someone whistling through cracked lips. Then silence. No cicadas, no frogs, no crickets. I stepped out onto the porch, barefoot, mug in hand. The trees stood still. A low mist coiled near the ground, thin and strange for summer. I listened hard, heard nothing. When I went back inside, the screen door creaked a beat too late, like someone else had just stepped through behind me. I locked it, though I never used to. My father never had. He used to say, if something wants in bad enough, a lock won't stop it. That night, I slept on the old pull-out couch. His shotgun leaned nearby, just in case. I told myself it was nerves, grief, a brain rattling loose from too many sleepless nights. But the next morning, I found small prints in the dirt outside, barefoot, child-sized, and they circled the cabin twice. I stared at those footprints for a long time. They weren't smudged or scattered like a child running. They were deliberate, evenly spaced. They circled the cabin once, then again closer the second time. No adult would have moved like that. And if it was a child, what were they doing barefoot in the middle of nowhere? Out in the woods where no road reached. I followed the trail a few yards before it vanished into the underbrush. No broken twigs, no drag marks, just stopped. Like the kid had been lifted straight off the ground. I didn't go any farther. I didn't want to. My stomach turned with that deep, animal knowing that something was watching me. Still and quiet, just behind the trees. I stayed inside most of that day, sorting papers, boxing up what little was worth saving. Late afternoon, I found another cicada shell, this one inside my father's old boot. I hadn't touched those boots the day before. It rested on the toe like it had crawled there and died overnight. I felt something twist in my chest. I started to wonder if coming back had been a mistake. At dusk, the silence came again. This time, it didn't creep in. It snapped into place. 1 second I could hear frogs down in the hollow, the next, nothing. Not even wind through the leaves. The air felt thicker than before, like the quiet had weight. I turned off the lights and sat by the front window, watching the tree line. I told myself I wouldn't scare easy. I'd grown up here. I knew these woods. Then I heard the whistle. Low, long, same warbling note, but this time it was closer. It didn't echo, it didn't drift, it was pointed, directed. I stood up slowly, heart hammering, and checked the locks again. The front door, the windows, even the back hatch. Everything was shut tight. But when I turned back, the front window was fogged over. From the outside, I leaned closer, And that's when I saw it. A handprint, pressed against the glass. Too small to be mine. Too long to be a child's. 5 fingers, each one slightly curled, as if it had rested there, watching me, waiting. I stumbled back, knocking into the end table. The flashlight clattered to the floor. When I looked up again, the window was clear. No print, no fog, just the forest. Still and blank, like it had always been. I slept with the shotgun across my lap that night. I must have dozed at some point because I woke to scratching under the floorboards. Not rats, not claws, fingernails, long, slow drags across the wood like someone crawling just beneath me. Then the whistle came again, inside the cabin. I bolted upright. My flashlight beam shook as I swept the room. Nothing. But the cicada shells were everywhere. On the coffee table, balanced on the doorknob, tucked into the folds of the blanket I'd been sleeping under. I don't remember grabbing my keys. I just know I ran barefoot to the truck and didn't stop until I hit the paved road. I never went back. Not for the rest of the boxes. Not for the shotgun. Not even for the photos I'd planned to keep. But 2 weeks later, I found something on my porch in Raleigh. A cicada shell. And below it, a child's footprint. Pressed into the concrete. The trail kicked up hard around mile 8 roots knotted tight under a rise. Slick rock plates forcing my stride into awkward hops. My calves burned, lungs barely catching up with my rhythm. Dusk settled faster in these hills, blue shadows stretching long between the trees. I leaned forward, pace steady, breath loud in the hush. No music, no podcasts, just the crickets and the slap of my shoes on packed earth. I'd started late. Shouldn't have. But I needed the loop 12 miles logged for the week. And this trail was part of my ultramarathon plan. The Rockmouth wasn't popular. Not like Alum Cave or Rainbow Falls. That's why I liked it. Sharp switchbacks, uneven terrain, and almost no one after 5 p.m. Perfect for solitude, for focus. I was maybe 2 miles in when I first noticed the sound, a soft shuffling, like another runner far behind me, feet scuffing leaves. It came and went. I figured it was my own echo, bouncing weird off the slope. The Smokies play tricks like that. My name's Logan Mills. I'm 22, born in Hendersonville, North Carolina. Been running trails since I was 16. Ever since my uncle started taking me out on weekends after Mom passed. He said the woods settle your thoughts. I believed him. I still do. Mostly. Back in high school, I'd run loops around Lake Imogen. Later, I started hitting real elevation, the Smokies. Pisgah, the ridge trails west of Cherokee. I liked the silence out there, the way it pressed in. Most folks find that unsettling. Not me. The only thing that ever shook me was people. Somewhere around mile 6. I crossed a footbridge over a dry creek bed. That's when I noticed it. My GPS tracker's small black band, usually locked to my wrist, was sitting on the hood of my car. I saw it clear in my mind. Right there by the wiper blade. Right where I'd tossed my keys. Except I was wearing it. I stopped dead on the bridge, turned my arm over. There it was, snug on my wrist, green light blinking like always. My stomach went tight. Maybe I'd brought a backup and forgot, but I don't carry backups, ever. That thing logs my pace, my splits, uploads to my phone when I get back. There's only one. I kept going. By mile 9, the woods got denser. The sun was gone. I switched on my headlamp and kept pace, watching for roots. That shuffling sound came again, this time behind me. Closer, still faint, but not random. It matched me. Step for step, I slowed. It slowed too. I stopped. So did it. I spun around. Beam sweeping the path. Nothing. Just trees and the narrow trail curling uphill. I waited 30 seconds, maybe more. My chest was tight. I started moving again. A little faster now. By the 10th mile, I was running full out. Not sprinting, not panicked, but close. I didn't look back. Didn't need to. I felt it. That presence. Footsteps just out of sync with mine. Like an echo trying to catch up. Then I saw it. It was just off the path, low in the trees. Crouched behind a fallen pine. My headlamp flashed across a shape. Pale, human-shaped, but wrong. The arms were long. Too long. Elbows cocked out wide. Fingers digging into the dirt like it needed traction. It didn't move. Neither did I. The light hit its face for a half-second blank. Smooth. Like a mannequin left out in the rain. Then I blinked, and it was gone. I backed up a few steps, then turned and ran. Full speed. No pacing, no breath control. Just moving. Behind me, something shifted. The crunch of leaves. Faster now. Matching my speed exactly. I didn't dare look back again. It severs. I veered down the switchbacks like they were on fire. Every muscle in my legs screaming. I couldn't hear it anymore. But that didn't help. The silence felt worse. Like it had moved closer. Like it was just behind my neck. Waiting for me to slow. I took a sharp turn too fast and slipped. My ankle twisted but didn't roll. I caught myself on a sapling. Heart punching holes in my chest. I didn't stop. Just kept going. My body knew the trail better than my eyes did now. When I hit the gravel stretch near the overlook, I thought maybe I'd shaken it. The footsteps had stopped again. I ducked behind a large rock outcrop, crouched low, tried to calm my breath. Sweat ran cold down my back. I waited. 30 seconds. A minute. Still nothing. I started to believe it was gone. I stayed low and moved slow, cutting off the trail and down through a drainage path I'd never used. My goal was the parking lot. Get to the car, lock in, drive like hell. That's all I needed. Then I hit the slope. It was steep downhill. Loose rocks and wet clay. I braced and took it fast, praying I didn't lose footing. But about 20 yards down, my toe caught a root. I flew, tumbled sideways. My shoulder cracked into the dirt. My vision went white. I rolled until everything stopped. And then, panting, not mine, right above me, someone stood, just stood, legs wide, arms slack at the sides, breathing like they'd run the same distance, loud, steady, human breath. I didn't move, didn't blink. I could feel the weight of their presence. No flashlight, just my own headlamp tilted sideways now, beam catching their lower half. Long fingers twitched. I launched myself downhill, barely able to see, crashing through brush, too scared to care. Every branch slapped me raw. Rocks cut my shins. But I made it. Somehow. The lot came into view. My car. I jumped in, locked the doors, sat there shaking. I didn't even start the engine right away. When I did, my headlights flicked on. And there it was. My GPS tracker, sitting on the hood again. I drove until I hit the highway. Didn't look back once. Got home by midnight. Still in running gear, still shaking. I told no one. But a week later, when I finally went to wash my car, I saw them. Under the rear bumper, deep scratches, 4 on one side, 5 on the other, spaced like hands. And they weren't rusted or old. They were fresh. The whistle was carved from deer bone, smooth and yellow-white, no longer than my pinky. My husband had made it back in '87 from the leg of a buck he shot near the property line. He'd sanded it down by hand, inlaid a strip of turquoise near the mouthpiece, and told me it was meant to call things from far off. I never asked what he meant by that. Back then, it just seemed like one of those mountain sayings men toss around when they want to eat. They want to sound important. It used to hang above the fireplace in the hunting cabin. After my husband passed, heart gave out while he was out dressing a doe. I moved the whistle into a box of his things. Didn't want it staring down at me all winter. But by March, it was back on the porch railing, like someone had placed it there on purpose. I knew I hadn't done it. I live alone now, 65 and stubborn about it. The cabin's halfway up Dogwood Hill, tucked between white pines and old rhododendron. It was supposed to be a retirement place for the two of us. Quiet, out of the way. I make the drive into town once a week for supplies and spend the rest of my days tending the garden, chopping wood, keeping the place standing. It's what he would have wanted me out here, watching the ridge. I threw the whistle into the creek that first time, stood on the bank and flung it underhand into the current, watched it vanish downstream with the ice melt and dead leaves. Thought that was the end of it. Next morning it was back, sitting on the porch step, dry as bone. I picked it up, looked it over. Same turquoise strip. Same little nick in the bottom from where he'd dropped it one fall. I didn't feel scared, not yet, just unsettled. Maybe I was losing track of things, doing strange routines without knowing it. I'd seen it happen to friends. One minute they're fine. The next, they're leaving keys in the fridge. Still, I tossed it again, this time down the ridge, into a thicket full of thorn bushes and deer scat. Didn't even hear it land. 2 days later, I stepped out for firewood and nearly kicked it. I stopped touching it after that. Days got longer. The trees bloomed heavy with white dogwoods, like every year. But I started noticing other things too. The wind didn't move right, came in still gusts, like air pushed by breath. At night, the whip-poor wills wouldn't call near the cabin. They stayed farther down the slope. And something I never saw what started leaving small piles of stones at the edge of the tree line. Always the same 3 stacked smooth, with moss scraped off. Then came the night I blew the whistle. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I was lonely, or maybe I just wanted to prove it was all nonsense. I sat on the back porch, crickets going strong, a half cup of bourbon in my hand. I lifted the whistle and blew one long note. It didn't sound like I remembered, not sharp or shrill, but soft, almost hollow, like air through a throat. At first, nothing happened. Then the woods went quiet. No bugs, no owls, just stillness. Then a sound. Not a scream, not an animal. It was like someone answering, mimicking the whistle, but wrong. Warbled, throaty. I froze, still holding the damn thing in my hand. From the tree line, something moved. It was crawling down an oak trunk head first. Arms and legs working slow and deliberate, like a spider. I couldn't make out much in the dark, but the limbs were too long, shoulders too wide. It reached the base of the tree and stopped, like it was waiting. I didn't wait. I went inside, locked both doors, pulled the curtains, sat at the kitchen table until sunrise. Shotgun across my knees, whistle lying on the floor where I dropped it. By morning, it was gone. But I knew better than to think it was over. I stayed inside the next day, didn't go to the garden, didn't cut wood, just drank too much coffee and watched the woods through every window. Nothing moved, not even squirrels. The air had that tight, held breath feeling, like before a storm, except the sky was clear. I kept checking the back porch, half expecting to see the whistle again. But it wasn't there. That night, I dragged an old dresser in front of the front door, hammered nails into the back windows. I'd never done that before. Even when bears were thick in early fall. Felt foolish, but I did it anyway. Sleep didn't come easy. I kept jerking awake at small creaks, every gust of wind, a footstep. At one point, I thought I heard breathing slow, steady, just outside the walls, but I couldn't tell if it was real or my imagination curling in on itself. 2 days passed like that. Then, like nothing happened, the whistle came back. This time it was on the kitchen windowsill, inside. I found it at dawn, while I was making eggs. It was just sitting there, neatly placed next to the tiny ceramic rooster I keep for decoration. I dropped the spatula, left the eggs to burn. I picked up the whistle with a dish towel and carried it out back. This time, hiking all the way down the ravine behind the house. I buried it under a pile of rocks near the base of a dry, hollow poplar, the kind we used to call ghost trees when I was little. I didn't say anything out loud. Didn't feel right. The next morning, it was on my nightstand. After that, I stopped trying to get rid of it. I put it in the drawer beside my bed and stopped opening it. But the noises didn't stop. They changed. Some nights, I'd hear tapping from the walls, like someone running their fingers down the siding. Other nights, it was footsteps, deliberate, slow, circling the house. The whistle never moved from the drawer. But I started to think maybe that didn't matter. I told myself it was just an animal. Or the wind. Old houses settle. Sounds carry strange in the hills. But deep down, I knew that thing in the woods hadn't left. One night, I broke, boarded up every door and window with whatever I could find plywood. Old cabinet doors, even the broken ladder from the shed. I locked the attic hatch, bolted it shut with 3 long screws. Then I sat on the couch with my shotgun and waited. And for a while, it was quiet. Too quiet. Then, just past midnight, I heard the attic hatch creak. Slow and steady. I didn't move. Just stared at the ceiling, waiting to hear the sound again. And then I did. The whistle blew from upstairs. Just once. Soft, hollow. Then silence. I didn't go up there. Couldn't. I stayed right where I was, gun in hand, until the morning light started to break through the cracks in the boards. When I finally climbed the attic ladder, the hatch was still locked from my side. Nothing inside but dust and cobwebs. But the air smelled wrong wet, like old leaves and rot. That was the last time I went into the attic. I still live here. People ask me why, and I don't have a good answer. Maybe it's pride. Maybe I'm just too tired to start over somewhere else. I don't whistle anymore. Haven't in weeks. But sometimes, when the wind's not blowing and the house is still, I hear it anyway. A single note drifting down from the ceiling, and footsteps above my head. Slow, careful, like someone's pacing, waiting for me to sleep. So I keep the shotgun beside the bed, and I don't open the drawer. I first came to Cane Fork because of a map that shouldn't have existed. Hand-drawn in charcoal and grease pencil, it showed a network of mine shafts sprawling under an old coal camp like veins. But the strange part wasn't the scale. It was the tunnels. Dozens of them, curving where they shouldn't, some overlapping in impossible loops. And none of them matched state records, USGS scans, or even the mining company's own archives. They said the hills were hollowed out decades ago, before regulations, before anyone cared what got left behind. Sealed up in the 70s, after a few too many collapses and a body went missing some foreman who never clocked out. Now, most of Cane Fork was overgrown, cabins sagging into the dirt, the only life coming from a few stubborn holdouts and the rusted machinery half swallowed by vines. I came for my thesis. I was 28, working through a geology graduate program out of Berea. My angle was old extraction zones, how they altered groundwater movement, disrupted limestone layers, maybe even triggered minor seismic activity. But what really pushed me into Cane Fork were the maps. A box of them, found in the back room of a decommissioned ranger station, tied with twine and labeled in shaky cursive unverified S.M. 54. The deeper I studied them, the more something felt off. Not just the way the shafts curved, but how the notes were written, phrases like, heard them again, and no light past second descent, and in the margins drawings, handprints but stretched, 4 fingers, no thumbs. I told myself it was just lore. Miners made stuff up all the time. Gas leaks, hallucinations, stories told to keep kids from sneaking in. Still, I packed extra batteries, chalk to mark walls, and a GPS beacon clipped to my belt. I kept a second one in my pack, just in case. It was early October when I arrived. The air sharp with rot and dry leaves. I stayed in an abandoned trailer I'd patched up with duct tape and plywood. Each morning, I'd hike the hills, trace the map overlays on my tablet, and crawl through whatever opening the kudzu hadn't choked shut. Most shafts ended quick caved in, flooded, or too unstable to trust. But on the 4th day, I found one that wasn't on any government chart. Narrow opening beneath a crumbling shale ledge, just wide enough to shimmy through. I marked it on my GPS and dropped a chalk X at the entrance. Inside, the air turned cold fast, smelled like rust and something sweet or faint, like decayed fruit. I moved slow, cataloging mineral deposits, photographing wall layers. Then I saw them. Handprints, deep in the stone, 4 long fingers, wide apart, no thumb. At first, I thought it was ancient, some prehistoric carving, but it wasn't carved. It was pressed. The stone warped inward like clay. There were dozens. I kept going. 100 yards in, the passage narrowed. My shoulder brushed both sides, just enough space to breathe. I shimmied through a sharp bend, belly down, rock scraping my pack. Then I got stuck. Couldn't go forward, couldn't back up. My foot snagged under an edge of stone. Panic rose fast, thick in my throat. I forced myself to breathe slow. Wiggle room. I had some. I twisted, shifted my hips, tried to yank my foot loose. And that's when I heard it. Something above me, skittering. Not on the ground, on the ceiling. I tilted my head. Heart pounding. Helmet light flicking upward. Shadows moved long and spindly. They crawled along the rock like insects. Silent, except for the scrape of nail on stone. I counted 3, maybe 4. One of them paused directly over me. Its head turned. I couldn't scream. Couldn't even breathe right. I yanked hard, pain shooting through my ankle, and slid free. My backpack tore. I left it behind. Crawled backward, scraped raw, helmet clanging. The shadows didn't follow, not then. I made it to a junction I hadn't noticed before, a shaft that sloped steeply down and to the left. Not on the map. I didn't care. I took it. The air was colder there. Damper. My light flickered. Battery warning blinking red. I ran. The shaft narrowed again, but this time I didn't slow. I squeezed through sharp rock until my arms bled. Then daylight. A hole in the hillside, barely big enough to crawl through. I spilled out into a ditch, gasping, bleeding, shoes gone. And just as I rolled over, something grabbed my ankle. Fingers long, cold, strong. It pulled once, then let go. I scrambled to my feet, didn't look back. But before I ran, I heard a voice from the dark. Whispered, gentle stay. I didn't stop running until I reached the tree line. Didn't care how deep the cuts on my legs were or how badly my ankle throbbed. I just needed to get out. The forest above Cane Fork was quiet, dead quiet, but even silence felt safer than what I'd left behind. I collapsed near an old fence post, dry heaving until my hands stopped shaking. I waited until full daylight before making my way back to the trailer. Every snap of a twig behind me made me flinch. I kept checking over my shoulder, half expecting one of those long-fingered shadows to crawl out from between the trees. But nothing followed. Not that day. I packed everything before noon. Left my field samples, my tablet, even my maps. I didn't want anything that might link me back to that shaft. I told myself I'd go back to Berea. Rewrite the thesis around something safer. Groundwater, maybe. Or limestone creep. Something that didn't breathe in the dark. But I couldn't let it go, not completely. 2 days later, I opened my second GPS beacon, the one I'd left clipped to my torn pack. It had been transmitting the whole time. I synced it to my laptop, pulled up the coordinate logs. There it was. The exact point I'd crawled through. The point I escaped. I saved it, backed it up twice. Then I loaded satellite maps, trying to trace the shaft from above. But the scan didn't show anything. No opening, no shadow in the ridge, not even a shift in elevation. The ground was unbroken. That's when the doubt crept in. Maybe I imagined it. The stress, the isolation, it messes with you underground. My advisor said so when I called. Said hallucinations in cave systems were not uncommon, and that sometimes we see what we fear. He told me to take a break. But I knew what I'd seen, and I knew what I'd heard. I tried going back in spring, not alone this time. Brought 2 classmates. Told them I'd found signs of undocumented water flow. Maybe a chance to publish. They were eager. We hiked out, GPS in hand. I followed the coordinates exactly. But the ridge wasn't right. The trees were younger. The ledge was gone. The slope didn't even match my notes. We searched for 3 hours. I showed them the spot from my photos, the same knot of trees. The same angle of sunlight, and still. The entrance wasn't there, like it had folded in on itself. One of them joked it was like the mountain didn't want to be mapped. I didn't laugh. Before we left, they found something. An old climbing helmet. My helmet. The one I'd lost in the shaft. It was cracked down the middle. Sun-bleached and full of dirt. They asked if it was mine. I told them no. I stopped fieldwork after that. Finished my degree with desk research and grant reports. Voided field assignments. Let my maps collect dust. But every so often, I'd check the coordinates again, plug them into different systems, different renderings. Always the same answer, there's nothing there. Still, some nights, I dream about the tunnels. I'm back in that narrow space, belly down, stuck and breathless. I hear the scrape of nails above me, the soft patter of something crawling, the whisper just behind my ear. And every time I wake, there's a weight in my chest, like I left something back there. Something I might have brought with me instead. A month ago, I found a new mark outside my apartment door. 4 long smudges across the concrete. Wide apart, no thumb, just dirt, or maybe ash. I didn't tell anyone. I moved apartments instead. Tossed the old maps, wiped my hard drive, told myself it was over. But sometimes when it's quiet, and I'm alone, I still hear it. That voice, low, patient, calling from the dark spaces behind the walls. Stay! And I wonder what might happen if I ever answered.